Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley. I would like to ask us, each and every one of you, that if you enjoyed these shows, please hit like, share, and subscribe after you view the show. Thank you very much. Well, hello, world, and welcome to another episode today of the Crisis Victory Show. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley. I'm your show host, and my co-host is Pete Turner, who is also the senior host of the Break It Down Show. Pete, pop in and say hi. Good morning, brother.
Hey, everybody.
All right. Okay. Yeah, today, everybody, we've got John Krotec of neomasculinity.solutions. John has got one hell of a story to share with us with regard to coming out of a sin to redemption to building off of the things that he has survived in his life, like so many of us have. As you all well know, I deal with a lot of PTSD related people on my talk show, a lot of former military, a lot of former gangsters, and also just a lot of people that live within the norm, but end up at one point or another going through some kind of a critical event. And I think John fits in that category. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to John at this time. And John, I want to welcome you to my show. I'm really excited about having you today. Pete talks really good about you, brother, and the things that you've survived and that you've gone through and what you're doing with all that knowledge today is exactly why we created the show in the first place. So without further ado, I'd like to share you with the audience and have you give them a little bit of a bio rundown on your life and then where you're at today with it.
Well, Dr. Hal Bradley, I'm privileged to be here and honored. You know, it has been a long and winding road. As a matter of fact, behind me, you'll see my vinyl collection. My better half bought me a turntable this past Christmas, and I've been rebuilding my album collection from back in the day. And
I love it.
The Beatles was certainly part of it. Remember the song, The Long and Winding Road?
Of course.
Which, compared to your story, you know, my story is an understatement, but it is a story. And it's something that a lot of young people go through, childhood sexual assault, you know,
Yes.
Something that we don't really like to talk about. And I didn't talk about it for 42 years, but it did cause me issues for a long, long time. And not until I was in an alcohol-induced accident, 2012, which left me with a traumatic brain injury, was I able to finally come to grips with that kind of stuff. And since then, it hasn't been easier. I think it's been almost harder because I had to look at the guy in the mirror and I had to change a lot of things, a lot of thought processes. You know, Doc, what trauma does to you. And
I do.
one
I
of the things
understand.
that I've learned is that it's been said that maybe up to 70 people on the planet have been affected in a negative way by a trauma. And then it's been also said, I don't know where they get these numbers because it's hard to calculate, that maybe up to 30% of the human population has had multiple traumas. So in the kind of work that you've been doing, you know, outside of the podcast, you've seen it firsthand and experienced it yourself that it's a target-rich environment, for want of a better, you know, description, that there's a lot of people out there who are hurt. And it's got to be guys like us who are able to come to grips with those kinds of things and use our experiences to get back into a flow state, but actually just to help our fellow human beings.
You know, John, that's exactly why I created the show in the first place. The Crisis Victory Show is based on people like you and me that have gone through some form or another of a critical crisis event. And instead of letting it keep us down in a negative sense, we take that knowledge and that survivorship and we utilize it to better humankind. And as you said earlier, I've got 22 years working in homeless camps, trap houses. My doctoral dissertation was done out on the streets with regard to being a hospice counselor to the homeless community. In April of 2004, I completed my doctorate. My bishop signed off and I acquired it that year. So I've been practicing for many, many years in that exact environment that you're getting ready to go into. And you're absolutely right. How do you feel when you walk into a house where you see three young kids sitting at a kitchen table sharing the same meal, and you look in the other room and there's 4 or 5 young girls sitting on a couch waiting to take a turn in a back bedroom to trade their flesh for a $20 fix? And you look at this countless times. You get knocks on your door in the middle of the night with another overdose being brought to you, and you know, so you're using Narcan kits to bring them back to life that the VA provided me because they know the work that I do. And I get rape victims that are dropped off here. And the reason that they come here, John, is because they have felony warrants on them or something to that nature of a legal problem, and they don't want to be dropped off at a hospital. So over the last 22 years, I've lived in the same place right downtown in the town that I live in, and I've been able to aid and assist in that capacity. However, at this time in my life, these last couple of years, as you know, I'm an author. I've got 12 books out in print. I'm working on a motion picture story of my life. I've got so much going on in other regards that I've decided to start slowing down a little bit on that type of work after 22 years of being in that field. And a lot of that, John, is acquainted to the shell shock, if you will, the numbness that eventually started settling into my life towards all of that, just to survive serving in those kind of communities. So I don't really know much about the neomasculinity.solutions program. I'm anxious to hear about it today because I love your comment about how we need to reach out and we need to be in servitude based on what we have survived in our life. So thank you for that moment of time to where I could share that in North.
No, well, thanks for sharing. You know, it takes courage. That's one of the first things I found out on this journey is that to reach down and grab them, quite literally, and face that guy in the mirror and all those monsters that are standing behind him. You know, you remind me of that guy that wrote the book In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which was that Dr. Gabor? Is it Montana?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah, what a freaking good book. I mean, it mirrors what you've done. Of course, I lived life on the edge, you know, after the event between the 3rd and 4th grade. I wrote and told stories prolifically. You know, I was telling stories in the 3rd grade and 4th grade to my classmates. And, you know, then it got a little bit older, and then the alcohol kicked in, and then I got to college, and then the sex stuff kicked in, and, you know, the proving of manhood and all this kind of crazy stuff that goes through your mind when you're violated like that.
Yeah.
Of course, was always a hard charger, got through college, traveled the world a little bit in corporate management, you know, in the restaurant business.
Interesting.
Did the Army thing. You know, I did that, and, you know, then got out and ran my own small company for 23 years. We made a lot of money selling ice axes in Florida. I led guided climbing trips to the Andes. Almost 12 years, you know.
Amazing.
Pushing to the envelope, man. I was pushing all the time, hard charging, motorcycles, things like that. And then I was out with a buddy of mine who was getting ready to head to South Korea. We weren't going to see each other for a while. And I had a little bit too much to drink. And on the way home was involved in a fender bender that could have killed the person that I hit and myself. And it left me with the luxury of a traumatic brain injury. And I got to tell you, Doc, you know, you've worked with people like that. I was in a bad place. I was in a really bad place. And all those demons started to come out. The things that I was unable to deal with as a child, I was going to have to deal with it as a man in my 50, you know, 65 now. So it was 12 years ago. So, you know, months and months and months and months of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and then, you know, speech pathology. Because I got to tell you, because of the injury, I couldn't put 2 sentences together. My brain was on overdrive constantly. No sleep. They gave me the proverbial, here, take a Prozac, you'll get some sleep. It made me suicidal, went cold turkey on that, and then just toughed it out with self-help books. And then I got to a day where I finally said, you know what? Everybody's got a methodology. And how come that one's not working for me? So I started to take the positive things that did work out of the people's books. I mean, the self-help book, you know, in the bookstore is like huge. And then I started coming up with my own theories, my own thing that worked for me. And I've scattered some of these. We can talk about them today. But probably the biggest thing that buzzed and got me tweaked, man, was to tune in, how would you say it, to the frequency of truth. You know, how do you, because we can all live lies, and most people do. They're wearing a mask of some sort. And what I found, man, is I had to kind of get away from it. I had to detach for a while. I had to find that calmness in the silence of my brain. And then the passion that I have about life and wanting to help others, you know, you hear it in the thumping of your heart.
Yes,
And
I get it.
then yes, well, so I'm preaching to the choir, but and thank you to your listeners, because we would really like you to walk away from this episode with some good intel.
Exactly. I'm very excited. This what you're saying about processing the things that worked for you that weren't necessarily all found in books or all found in conferences or meetings with other people. There were your own unique individual self-help programs that you designed and recreated for yourself. And that is so significant, John, because as you know, NA, AA, a lot of these other kind of programs, people do draw from the well, but it's never ever quite enough. They need to go within their own self and right the wrongs, and that way they can grow on the rights and start eliminating the wrongs through a period of time, because everything takes time. Nothing happens overnight. And I
And
don't know.
we wish that it did, but you're so totally right. It doesn't happen overnight,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
true.
grueling. It's Nothing's easy, and you have to want it. We hear that, Doc. It's so cliche. Just do it, and all this. The Nike swoosh and all.
It's never that easy.
No, and then but being in this age of digital information and lots of commo going on, and we're being bombarded with so much noise. And so what I started to even do, and this is kind of, I think it's from the Stoicism from centuries ago. I started to practice the art of detachment. Doesn't mean you isolate and you forget about the world, but I really had to turn off the noise. And like a show like yours is significant because it's actual value, and we're not lying to anybody.
Exactly. And I thank you for that recognition. That's why I told you in the last 2 years, after 22 years of being in trap houses and in the camps, you hit a point of numbness, you hit a point of burnout, and you need to pull yourself away from that, because like all caregivers, we have to make sure that we self-help and caregive so we can continue in the work that we do today. And that was a really good factor and a good point that you brought into conversation here.
What do they call that, Doc? Compassion overdose or something like that? Fatigue.
No, yeah, it's an actual syndrome, is what it is, and it's like people that survive in combat, and then they have guilt feelings because they survived and their best friend didn't. It's kind of like when I went through my 15 years in the drug cartels and walked in one day and into that entire life and spent 17 years at the Department of Justice going after high value targets. There comes a point where you have to first hit acceptance. No matter how extreme it is, you have to hit an acceptance of right from wrong, and whether or not you can continue to live with your own self when you look in that mirror you were talking about earlier on. And in my life, anyway, that's the point I hit. I went to Culiacan, Sinaloa, Mexico, back in 93, and sat down with my compadres and said, "Look, I'm moving anywhere from 12 to 15 million dollars a month worth of cocaine up for you in the Northwest, and I need to step away from this. I'll set up your guy." And we were all paisan from when we were young. I knew El Chapo 42 years ago when he was just a weed merchant like I was at that time. And Rafael Cara Quintero, all these really big famous names today. Well, we were all together back in the day when we were just starting the construction of all of that. But the point was this: they lied to me. They said, "Okay, good enough, brother," hugs and handshakes, jumped on a plane, flew back to SeaTac Airport, got in my car, drove home, and found 350 kilos of cocaine and 2 soldados sitting on my driveway. Because I was an underboss, because I was a kingpin status person under the eyes of the Department of Justice, I had the ability to turn those soldiers around with that load, feigning federal heat. And the following day, I walked into the U.S. Attorney's office and said, "Hey, I need a bigger baseball bat than they've got, because I'm going to take on the Sinaloa drug cartel." And that is how I started righting my wrong. Now, I understand, John, this is an extreme example, but my life was an extreme life. And the only way that I could get out of it and justify it, it wasn't like I never got arrested and started telling on all my friends to cut a deal with the feds. I didn't give a damn if I went away for life or not that day that I walked in there. My total focus was preservation of my family, removing myself from an element that I felt extremely guilty, that syndrome we were talking about, and the only alternative I had after going down and trying to do it the way that I figured would be accepted. But life doesn't always present an easy alternative to us. But I also believe, John, that saying "I'm sorry" is never enough. I think that we have to show through actions that we truly have made this decision to become better than that which we were at the time that we were caught up in whatever segment of life that we were dealing with. That was not, it wasn't healthy for us. It wasn't good for us. And that was my extremity. I said, okay, I'll take on this cartel. And as a result of that, after I was in prison, and one day I'm at Leavenworth, and I'm get called up to the warden's office one day, and there's two State Department guys standing there saying, how'd you like to become a contractor for the Department of Justice? Pulled me out of prison within 24 hours, and not even 2 months later, I was buying 500 kilos of cocaine down in Costa Rica in a whorehouse. Now, you have to understand something, John. At the same time, during my years in federal prison, I entered my seminarial studies, got my original ordination. I had Assemblies of God directive that I was under at that time. Later came to Seattle and was reordained under a bishop up here that I spent 25 years with. But I took advantage of the moment to start doing instead of saying I'm sorry, to show how sorry I was for the choices I'd made in my younger years. I became a hospice counselor to fellow dying prisoners while I was at Springfield Medical Center. I had a terminal disease myself and volunteered for an experimental drug, and here I am 30 years later, alive and kicking. But the point was this: I got certified in hospice. I've done newspaper stories, and I have articles showing me them and all that stuff. But it was a fascinating part of the journey. My seminary, John, was being completed in death rooms where men were laying there by themselves with no family, no friends, nobody. And the only connection they had in the last days of their life was a fellow prisoner who had been trained and certified to be their hospice counselor. It was an amazing program. And 2.5 years later, when I graduated seminary and was transferred up to Leavenworth, cured and doing well, I worked in the education department up there and started training people to get their GEDs. I started utilizing the benefit of the knowledge that I had taken the time to acquire during my incarceration to prepare for when I come out and released to the world and start rebuilding life, which we all know that have done time how hard that can be. But little did I know that they were going to walk in and offer me a job that would redefine my life for the next 17 years. And during that time, John, I was under the tutelage of a bishop in Seattle, 7 years in training, and then I was installed as senior pastor of my own church. So here I am preparing Wednesday nights for my Sunday morning gospel prayers that I would do with my church congregation. And a call would come in Thursday and say, pack a bag, you're on your way to South America. Boom, just like that. So I had 17 years, John, of one day I'm in the church and the next day I'm down in some foreign country on a spec op. And I finally had to come to terms with it. And I approached my bishop, told him I needed to take a sabbatical. I stepped out for 4 years from the church and just focused solely on the cases. And he agreed. The work that we were doing was absolutely amazing. And that's what prompted writing 12 action adventure novels and my autobiography, because we wanted to keep everything documented because it was just an absolute unreal story. And we knew it. So everything that I talk about on the show with you and other people in the past is fully and completely documented, because this is why Hollywood has an interest in turning it into a motion picture. And I'm hoping that they do, because I think the story of sin to redemption is extremely important. But there's always a price. There's always a cost when you step over that line and transition into what you need to be on a humanitarian scale, which is what Neo-Masculinity.solutions is, isn't it?
Well, it's part of it, but there's a lot to unpack with what you just shared, and thank you for sharing it. What I found out in my life is that it's really a search for each of us for authenticity.
I like that.
Who are we? What do we do? Why are we here? How did we get here? What do we do once we get here? The people that fade in and out of our lives, why were they there? What lesson was I trying to learn? And like, even when I started my small business selling backpacking gear in Florida and selling climbing gear and crampons and ice axes, and people would walk into the shop and they'd go, where are the mountains in Florida? And I'd go, there's none here. You have to go. So I started taking trips to South America.
Wow.
And we started doing Bolivia, Peru, Argentina. We started to do real high altitude climbs. I mean, high altitude stuff. We don't even belong up there, Doc. There's no oxygen. Yeah. But what I found out was, somebody asked me one time, what is mountaineering? High altitude mountaineering. And I said, well, it's whoever suffers the best. And it's kind of like that in life. And let me tell you, when you're standing when you're standing on the ground and you can actually see the curvature of the earth,
Wow.
and the sky is bluer than your background.
Wow.
And it took you months and months of preparation to get you there, but you're there with a bunch of kindred spirits, and the clouds are forming around you, and then they're gone.
Wow. Amazing.
It's kind of it's a very, thank you. It's kind of it's a transformation. And so I had 26 summit attempts, all over 20,000 feet, and I think I made it to the top of 12. I don't know. It doesn't matter. One is enough. You know, we don't belong up there. It was a test for me. And it helped me to make a lot of good friends. Sometimes the people you thought would have no problem making it to the top bonked. And then sometimes the meek little woman or guy on your team that you think doesn't have a chance, but you're going to help them get there. Yeah. They get there. And I've shared tears and high fives and slaps. And the cool thing about the trips that I managed was that they weren't just holidays. They were life-changing experiences.
Yeah.
And those people, most of the people, we had people go on multiple trips, but most people that I climbed with are still friends, lifelong friends. And I've had quite a few of them tell me that we changed their lives on that mountain.
A shared experience, yes.
And for your listeners, and you said about the long journey and nothing's easy. In Nepal, the Sherpas have a mantra, and they say slowly, slowly. And somebody might go, will we get to the top? Are we going to make it to the summit? It looks like it's right there. You can reach out and grab it, but it's still, 16 hours away. And the Sherpas will say, if the mountain lets you. And so that's kind of how life is. Am I going to make it?
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to give up. You're not going to quit. But I can guarantee you this, if you persist and you believe in yourself, you're going to make it. There's nothing that they can do to you with the story you have, and there's nothing that they can do to me with the story I have that's going to trigger me anymore. And if I do get triggered, I know how to not react. It's a mind game. You know that.
Yeah, I get that. I get it.
So you train for months and months and months for some of these climbs, and then you'd get there and you'd have lousy weather all week long. And you'd say, well, that's just the way the planet is. You can't, you can plan all you want. You can have a route all picked out, the strengths and the weaknesses of the teammates. And then something happens. It's too warm and a serac breaks off. There's an avalanche up the road. There's a rock fall. Whatever it is, life is like that.
There's an obstacle. Absolutely.
Every single day something was going on. And there were times where I had to chink somebody into the ice because we knew they weren't going to make it. And we would tell them, stay here, stay hitched up, drink plenty of water, make sure you're covered from the sun, and we'll be back to get you on the descent. And, because we knew we had to make that call. But again, in life, in our own lives, I think the first thing is you have to make that call. And tell me, Doc, if I'm off kilter with this, and this sounds kind of weird, but it's okay to be traumatized. There's no shame in it. It happens to millions of people. It doesn't take away your pain, but you're going to be okay. And we're going to get you through that. There's no shame for you to be here and realize, like I didn't realize as a third grader, that, what happened was not all right. But now it's in my 50s when I had to deal with it. I had to get over that shame that's associated with that type of violation. And a lot of times the reason why they do it to boys is because they know the boys won't talk. And I can't even imagine what it would have been like for my life personally if my mom or dad had not noticed the significant change in me. The cover of one of my books, it shows third grade and it shows fourth grade. It shows a lively kid in a Cub Scout suit, wide-eyed, bushy tail, and then it shows a great white shark. There's no feeling. And then with all the acting out and the drugs and all that to deal with it, the alcohol especially, a couple of people along the way tried, but they didn't really see they didn't really ask the right questions. I'm not blaming them. They're just not qualified like you.
Exactly.
If I was around you and I was doing all that shit, you'd go, John, talk to Doc. what's really going on with you?
Yeah, no. You know what I do, John? In the 22 years that I've worked in that exact environment, usually I'm just there to offer self-support, not be a judgmental person of any kind whatsoever, and allow them to come to the well. I never try to put myself upon anybody that I'm looking at, and I see that they are totally, completely maxed out as a result of what recent trauma or prolonged traumas, events that they've survived, they're currently going through. And more often than not, because of the calm approach, if you will, they start to open up, and then trust becomes developed. And then over the years and years of working in that industry, word gets around. People let other people know that this is a man who's not going to judge you about nothing. He wants to hear what you have to say, let you reflect at it. And more often than not, I'll go back a day or two later because I like to collect information, pray on it, think on it, and then figure out which is the best solution to approach the person. But getting back to your very beginning when we started this, I think the most significant point is the initial acceptance. We have to see that we're bent, not broken. And what we have to do is build off that foundation of whatever negative circumstances we survive through. So how do we do that, John? We start looking at the stronger points of the negativity that we have just transformed ourselves from as we're recreating our life, which is exactly what you did in your case. You know, you can't run away from the dreams. When I was captured, I was tortured every day of my captivity. When that team came in and rescued me and Manny, an undercover agent I was working with, we were down in El Salvador. Every day we thought we were going to get shot and killed. We lived with that trauma and that tragic, and I still have it to this day. But you know what I do, John, is when it wakes me up in the middle of the night, I immediately tell myself, hey, it's never going to leave me, so I need to pull it out, talk to it, tuck it back inside, and make that peace with it on a momentary basis. And this is my individual, not out of books and self-help studies and things like that. That is my coping mechanism. So when you brought that up a little while ago on the show about how you do the same thing, that is the signature to success with regard to being able to not only overcome a trauma, but to achieve as a result of overcoming it.
Absolutely. You know, and that's, you know, the acceptance, the realization, the
Yeah.
authenticity, the desire to get well, to get better, to change the, you know, to spank those demons and to move on. And you're
Yeah.
right. They never go away completely.
No.
Let's be honest here.
No.
And we are. But even like for me too, and I know it's personal, you mentioned personal journey and
Yes.
you mentioned your spiritual studies. And to me, the spiritual side of it is huge. When I delved into plant medicines, DMT specifically, you know, all monitored by professionals and all this. And the ancients with plant medicine, because, you know, they tried to give me Prozac, but it made it worse.
Yeah.
And so I sought out other methodologies to come to grips. You know, the ancients, shamans, and those kinds of people believed that when we're traumatized, the soul leaves the body. Our spirit goes somewhere else.
It
right?
separates to heal. Yes.
It separates, right? And so the DMT specifically brought it back. It brings your spirit back. The violated spirit comes back to your overall being. And it only took 2 or 3 episodes of that to make me realize that there's a lot more to what's going on in this world than meets the eye. And so that was part of my journey too. It got me off the Prozac, like 1 or 2 doses. And then it was controlled, and it really helped to get me to start tracking again. And you mentioned, we both talked about reading other people's stuff, you know, see what works, see what doesn't work. But
I agree.
Another thing, Doc, that helped me a lot, I mean, a lot, man, was I started to reach out. I started to track down some of my older friends. Now, the females were harder to find because, you know, some of them get married in that. But I started to track down the people that I used to hang with that I knew I could count on. And I got to tell you, man, we don't.
That's important.
I was amazed, brother, at the amount of old friends who still remember the old John Boy, how much fun we used to have, and stupid stuff we used to do. But I was amazed at the men and the women now who were like so thankful and so glad that I called. And to me, and you just said it, having good, close, intimate friends is important sometimes for that journey to find yourself again.
Well, and also, John, I believe in commonality. In my case, when I was captured and when I survived, that was in 2002. And in 2003, there were 7 of us at the Seattle VA hospital that were given a certificate and recognized for being former prisoners of war, captured and tortured on foreign soil while in the service of our country. And over the last 21 years, every single one of my brothers, I call them my brothers because they are, they've all passed away. And 2 years ago, Captain Robert, former Green Beret captain, was my go-to guy that I could share my nightmares with and my experience of how do I survive this? Because, you know, suicidal tendencies even came upon me a couple years ago. And what happened was Captain Robert called me up, said, "I love you, brother. Don't bother coming by." Boom, took his life. And I just wanted to say goodbye to his friend. But what it did, John, was it removed the last person that I had in my life. That was my go-to guy that understood what it was like to have been captured and to have been tortured and to have been rescued and survived all of those stages of what only the 7 of us in the VA at Seattle at that time had experienced. And we had each other. And then over the years, as each one of them would pass away from suicide or natural causes, it was down to me and Captain Robert. And 2 years ago, when he took his life, I'm sitting here 2 years later, and I so desperately miss him because I don't have the fulfillment that I would get when I would have a bad night, or he would have a bad night, and he had me to lift him up and walk him through it. It's pretty remarkable. So when you can attach to things of familiarity, like you're discussing with old relationships and old friendships, these are very important and very strong factors to bring into when you're on your self-recovery journey yourself. And I'm not talking alcohol and drugs. Self-recovery is far more complicated than that. And we're talking about a retransitioning of the way you approach life in general. And that's what helps us do it, is the support that we find through people that we can trust or that we can relate to, or people that we are quote unquote comfortable and familiar with because we've shared a similar experience. And go ahead, please.
No, go ahead, man.
No. That was good. I was finishing right there, but I just love it so much that you brought up about finding anchor support through comfortable and compatible relationships of your past, because people aren't the same as they were when you left them 20 or 30 or 40 years ago.
No,
they're not. It's kind of interesting to get some new regrowth, if you will, from relationships of trust and friendship that you're now reacquainting yourself to at the current time in your life.
absolutely true. You know, I interviewed a guy several years ago. His name's Bobby Henline. He was blown up in Iraq, and he's been through like 80 or 90 everybody in the Humvee was killed but him, but he was burned down to the skull. And he's a comedian now called the gosh, what does he go by? The real the Well Done Comedian.
Oh, I love it.
One of the things that he told me, I think when we were talking, was, and it's an Army term, or
I was Army. I did it too. I was infantry airborne.
Embrace the suck, right?
Yeah. Yes.
One thing that you one thing that you brought up was, we're never going to be able to escape whatever those traumas are. They're going to come back at sometimes the weirdest times, but there's no escape. So, embrace it, talk to it like you do, and then
put it back inside
and move on, drive on, Fido. Easier said than done. Let's get real here, Doc. But you know the deal, man. And once you do that enough, and you learn how to not react or overreact. I've been in those suicidal ideation places.
Sure.
It's not fun. I've been out at the fire ring in my backyard and down on my knees and crying to something bigger than me to please give me some guidance. Please.
And thank God for it.
Yeah. So, so be consistent with that self-care. Realize that, just when you think you've overcome the mountain and you're there, then what happens? You look down at the descent. And the descent is when most of the fatal accidents happen on the mountain, because you get relaxed, you think everything's cool. But life doesn't give you a chance to relax. You got to always be ready to overcome whatever challenge the universe wants to give you.
Absolutely.
So we're there now. We're warriors of the spirit. Sounds cliche, but it's true.
Well, and you know, another thing too, John, I'm in my 70s now. You know, I'm not such a young person anymore. And I look to the challenge of life every single day as I approach a new day. And one of the things that comes to me frequently is when you're 80 or 90, if you make it that far, and you're sitting in a rocking chair on that porch in the front of your house, do you have that gleam in your eye and that smile on your face that nobody understands? And like climbing a mountain or riding your Harley or whatever it is that you do that gives you the thrill of the moment, you want to make sure that you manifest that into something that in your later years of life, when you become more immobilized, you're unable to accomplish the things that you did in your younger years. You can sit there with that gleam in your eye and smile on your face and say, I have done this, I have survived this, and it was amazing. And that
That's
is what,
yeah.
yeah, that's what, you're 65 years old, you get it. You're at an age now where you're starting to already have background reflections of the things that brought you joy in those moments of your life, and they become less and less as we move forward in later years of life. But no matter what, you want to be able to sit on that rocking chair on that front porch someday, brother, when you're incapacitated and you can no longer accomplish those things. But you want people to see that smile on your face and that gleam in your eye, wondering, what is it that they are thinking about right now? I'm so curious. Well, build your own, folks. Get out there and build your own. And
See, that's a great point. You know what I call that? It's part of the recovery, right?
yes, of
I
course,
call it the dream sickle. I don't know what the dream sickle. What's that mean? That's when you
I
get up
like
on
that.
that mental bicycle
Yeah,
and you remember the dreams that you had, which
I
really
like
are
that.
the things that you've experienced in your life. And it's exactly what you just said, Doc.
Yeah,
It's riding your dream sickle, and people are going to go,
yeah,
"Why the hell is that? How? Why is he smiling?"
yeah,
And I would be
exactly.
next to you, and I would go,
Yeah,
"Oh man, he's on his
yeah,
dream sickle," you
that's
know.
right.
And that is a way that we can create positive energy when we
Absolutely. And
don't
other
have,
people see
yeah,
it. And other people see it. And that's
you
the
know.
significance. We want to pass on, John, the goodness that life has given us. We already know that everybody's got bad, but that's not what I focus on, brother. I love every single person on the planet.
I do
5 years,
too.
I know you do. I can feel it. I
My
see it.
wife thinks I'm crazy, but I'm
No, we're
not.
not. We're not crazy. We have found that sweet spot in life where we absolutely have that acceptance. You know, I got hit by a contract killer 5 years ago here in my own backyard. I was left for dead. I was able to somehow come out of it and crawl to one of my tenants' doors and knock on their door. And I remember fading in and out. I knew my moment of death was within minutes. And it was insane, brother, because I had this amazing peace that came over me. And I was ready to go. I was ready to leave all of this behind. I didn't need it. And I was so content. But what was really funny was when I went out the last time, I didn't wake up for a day and a half. And I was in a hospital bed when I did. And the first thing I did was forgive the guy that was sent to kill me. All I was a name and an address on a piece of paper. I get that. I lived 15 years of that life. So I totally get that. But you know what it was?
That's
There
called
was,
living life on the edge, brother.
it is, brother,
You
literally.
know what I'm
But
saying, man?
the main thing is I woke up with love in my heart for that guy. I didn't wake up angry or any other negative feeling. That was confirmation to me that I have finally made where I need to be and have that peace in my life. And John, that's what we try to sell through the show to other people like you and me that have gone through events that, yeah, they're horrific, they're bad, of course. But you know what? There's an alternative to that entire scenario as we complete life that we still have left to live. And that is finding that comfortable sweet spot out of all of the negativity that we did and remember the highlighted points and then teach those, instruct those, pass that information on. Because believe you and me, brother, 22 years working in trap houses and homeless camps, I have seen it all. I have seen horrible,
Can't even
horrible
imagine,
things.
man.
Yeah, I wish I couldn't. And I'll be honest about that at this point because that kind of work is not for everybody. And I don't think anybody should put in 22
But
years.
so badly needed, though.
Well, yeah, it is. But we can do that through organizations where one person isn't the one doing it all the time. It's a burnout syndrome, brother. Believe me, please. 2 years ago, I quit going into trap houses altogether. One, because I'd been hit and left for dead, and it could happen. You have to be on your toes when you made a cartel your enemy. The other part of it was just the absorbing so much sadness and so much sorrow and so much low self-esteem and doing it on a continual, almost daily basis for decades, John. then
Well, you become a magnet for that.
you
You
do become
you basically absorb that because your heart is so big, and it's okay for a guy to say this, right? Your heart is so big that you're like you're a target, and if you don't,
well, that's perfect. You're exactly right. So you've been there and done that. Then you wouldn't know that statement if you hadn't. You do become damaged goods yourself, and then you're not as productive for the people that you're hoping that you can bring some kind of joy to their life or understanding or peace. And
true, man. It's
is.
a wild and woolly world. I didn't come close to any of those cartels like you did. I was probably buying stuff that you were bringing in, right? And when I graduated from college, the last thing that I did was I introduced my friend to one of those guys that was a dealer that dealt in flakes, right?
Yeah.
And
got it.
I went to California. I was working with the Chart House restaurants in San Diego, La Jolla. I mean, the mecca of beauty on the West Coast. And my mom sends me this. Yeah, she sends me this article from the paper that this guy that I introduced to this other guy got busted with 12 ounces of 12 ounces. We'll just leave it at that. And he got 8 years in a federal jail. And that was what ended that. When I graduated from college, I put it behind me. But about 7 years later, I'm in a bar down in Florida, and there he is. He had gotten out a year or two early, and he was doing the same stuff. Yeah. He was chopping up things on the table, and I was like, man, you haven't learned your lesson. And
not only that, John, but what happens is we tend to go back to that which is comfortable, and it's comfortable because we know it.
He had a massive heart attack at 51.
Yeah. Oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that. But
go ahead.
No. The point is this is where a lot of people never succeed in recovery, and they end up going back in through the system periodically throughout their life. They get out, they maybe want to do something different, John, but what eventually happens is they slip back into that comfort zone of something they know.
Yep.
Even if it's destructive, it's something they know. And
it broke my heart, man. It broke my heart because this guy had such potential. He was on the college football team with Bobby Bowden, and and the rest is history. And he had all of the skill sets that a lot of people don't have, and it just broke my heart. And it happens to so many good individuals, male and female, who fall into that trap. And I'm preaching to the choir. You've seen it.
No, that's the reason I walked in on my own free will and of my own resource, because I couldn't carry it any longer within me. And
no doubt.
I had 15 nonstop years in the cartels. 6 of those years was smuggling it into the United States. The rest was setting up distribution, safe houses, transportation routes. I mean, I became a corporate level employee at that point, and I was the #1 target of Operation Northern Exposure from 91 to 94.
But even the competing cartels were probably gunning for you too.
Well, we had Sinaloa. They were gunning for me, but we would just have the problem taken care of. I don't want to go into that.
Yeah, we won't. And this is your show, and I'm here with you.
Yeah, it's a pretty ugly life. But you know what? It's also about decisions made. I was a Cub Scout. My mother was a den mother. I was a Boy Scout. My dad was assistant scoutmaster. I grew up with the foundation of knowing good from evil, right from wrong. I grew up like that. Like I said, as I told you, I'm 70 years old. So I came from an era where people didn't lock their doors at night and they left their keys in their cars, and everybody knew everybody. And it was a wonderful
neighborhood looked out for you,
Yeah. And then what happens? I end up in Mexico in a mining camp at the age of 15, come back, go to the military, do my 3 years, come out, and within less than a year, I'm driving carloads of marijuana to the United States. I hit that tipping point. And I look back on the experience of it today, and I thank God that he transformed me through the renewing of my mind. And that is truly what did happen. Guilt ate me alive. When I went down and tried to legitimately walk away from the 15-year life that I had created for myself, I was no longer comfortable, and it was no longer familiar to me, because I had already hit that point of going, I just had a son. Am I going to bring my child up in a drug cartel, or am I going to try to bring my child up into a world of decency? And for the world to know, my son today is a fentanyl addict out on the streets, and I don't even know where he's at.
Sorry to hear that.
I am too. It breaks my heart every day of my life. But you know what? I love him with all my heart. I pray for him every day of my life. And maybe, just maybe, I won't get that knock on the door by 2 police officers in the middle of the night.
Well, I hope you don't. You're on my prayer list now.
Well, thanks, John. That's why I brought it up.
Well, you mentioned guilt, right? And so I came up with this philosophy. I was working with a woman in Florida for overweight kids, and we were talking about things.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I came up with this philosophy where I took what I had learned in high school astronomy and kind of applied it to the human organism, right? And you have a thing called a black hole. You know the deal. You're a doctor. It just sucks everything into it.
Yes.
And that black hole, as a human, the black hole human has guilt and shame and blame that they operate in. It's like a vicious circle of energy that just sucks. It just destroys everything around. It even brings light into it. And then you have a spiral galaxy human being, which has these arms, right? And what turns the black hole galaxy into a spiral galaxy is courage. You finally have the courage to step outside of your black hole. And what does that spiral galaxy do? It spreads out throughout the entire universe, and it cross-pollinates with all the other spiral galaxy human beings, right?
Exactly what I was talking about, which condemns so many people. They return to that which is familiar. They don't know how to spiral out into the universe and acquire that other significant, necessary part of that which we are. Your body, mind, and soul. You're a Trinitarian creation. And what you're talking about is so metaphysical and so etherical, and I absolutely love it. My master's, by the way, is in metaphysics, so I really get it about studying Sanskrit and the Kundalini and
love all
sitting
that.
there.
Kundalini, energy,
and herbology and naturopathic healing compounds. I get it, but what I like the most about it is the ability to have vision. You have vision, John. You're sitting here explaining to my audience right now. Here is an alternative solution to what Dr. Bradley has been giving you all along. And I absolutely love that, because you're right. We need to be expansive. We need to recognize that we can spin in that circle, yet not be out of control. We can spin and I love it. I love it. Good interpretation.
Well, I know we haven't talked much about neo-masculinity. I know but anyhow, neo-masculinity, very briefly.
Let's get into it. I want to hear it.
No, there's a lot here, but there's no doubt right now. There's just no doubt in our minds on the team we've built that humanity is experiencing the greatest challenge ever. And what it is the constant and steady bombardment of digital information. And here's the deal. Most of it is unreliable. We've identified 6 types of information. Reliable's over here. It's lonely self. And misinformation and disinformation and noisy information and AI information and malinformation. This is what's at work. Bits and pieces of the truth, right?
Yes.
So most of it's unreliable. And what are we seeing, Doc? Division, anger, frustration, hatred, toxic masculinity. Men don't even know if they're men anymore.
Yeah.
And we've coupled with it. We have an information analysis process. We call it the human information sniff test. We won't get into it now, but what we do is we've actually coupled it. We brought a gender role component in with it. And so they're talking about identity and all this. So what we've done is we've taken traditional gender roles. A single mom can have a male role. It doesn't mean that she wants to be a man and vice versa.
Right.
And what we've done is we've created this process. We went back in time and studied history. A man's primary mission is to protect his family and his loved ones from threats.
Number one mission. That's right.
That's it. There's no mastodons these days. There's no saber-toothed tigers. There's none of that. The threat today is information that's destroying family, decimating cultures and societies all over the planet. So we're working on a couple of things. It's not rocket science.
No, but what did John tell us when he was on the Isle of Patmos and he was writing the book of Revelations? He said that knowledge will increase as we get ready to come to the end of these things that we understand and know. And when the times become like that, which were the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, this is another sign of the returning is nigh, because now you have so much misaligned information out there that people don't know if they're a man or a woman. They don't know if they're homosexual or lesbian. They don't know if they're any of the above thoughts and feelings, if you will, that they're struggling with in their day-to-day life. And what we do, we compound it with more misinformation. So what you're talking about
Totally
that you're
right,
creating,
man.
yeah, and what you're creating there is something that needs to be put out there. And maybe, just maybe, we can save a few people with that, brother.
Well, you're totally tracking, man. You know, you're
Oh yeah, I'm on it.
you know, you're outside the bubble, right? So you're in a good spot. And so what it really is, it's just we're returning to viable ancient practices. We're returning to human intuition. Like if you tell me something, Doc, and the hair on the back of my head goes up, and I'm thinking he's full of shit.
Yeah.
You know, that's not true. You know, so intuition, we have to pay attention to it. First impressions is valuable. And then we have to return, and we're going to have to return to scientific method, critical thought, right?
Yes. Critical thought.
Thinking about empowering gender roles, not the identity. I don't care if you're homosexual or not. It doesn't matter to me. But what role are you fulfilling, right? Embracing logic and reason, which the early guys, Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, they were always looking for truth.
Yeah.
And nobody got on them about it. Those guys were revered, right? And then the last thing that we've heard a lot about, and you and I could talk for 3 more episodes on this, is utilizing common sense. So
Yeah.
we've got all the information. We know it's true. And we need to act on it and to think about that. Yeah. The future of our humanity,
yes,
the very future of humankind itself, is predicated on whether or not our children can separate truth from lies,
discern it. Absolutely.
fantasy from reality,
Absolutely.
facts from fiction. And if we as grown-ups, right, you're in your 70s, I'm in my 60s, if we as grown-ups cannot protect our families from threats, nowadays information threats, then we're not men. And you know, the neo-masculine definition on Google actually says that in order for a man to be a man in today's world, that he has to accept changing social norms, right? So if a social norm that's being changed is a lie, they're telling a man, most men are honorable. They're telling a man he has to lie to be a man.
Yeah, I don't accept that at all. I'm with you, brother.
Talk about smoke and mirrors.
But that's what it is. It is truly. Take a look at social media today from just 10 years ago, John.
It's
just
insanity,
10 years.
brother.
Oh, it's beyond that. It's complete control. And you're talking about division and hatred and negative issues that are constantly being perpetrated by people, and they're reprogramming a thought. What you're talking about bringing to the world is absolutely necessary at this exact and precise time. And by the way, if you've done a book on this, I'd love an autographed copy sent to me. I would really like to have one.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, here's what we've done. We've got a little handbook based on the Ranger handbook.
Yeah, I love that.
It's called the Sentinel Handbook. Doc, it's 40 pages. We wrote it so an 8th grader can understand it. It's a primer and a foundation on what we've just talked about. We've written it in English, all the romantic languages, Italian, Spanish, French, German. We've got it in Hebrew. We've got it in Arabic. We've written it in Russian and in Chinese. And it's $2.95 for the PDF, right? So visit the website, get that. But what we're working on, this is where you and I might be able to strategically talk about things, is where we've written a college curriculum. We've got a thing called the Brainary. We teach brains, not brains. And we have 4 silos. One's college level PhD, you're a doctor. One is high school level. One is, when we're using AI to write it, we're giving the information. We have middle school, we have kindergarten through 6th grade, and we're creating curricula for each one. The college one is finished.
Yeah, I love the concept of what you're talking about. And you're also right about grafting that into somebody at a very early age in life, because as the mind develops, things tend to stay with you longer in memory.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Doc. We want to start out with the kids. And so we're going to have our mini course out soon. It's called the Brain Freeze, Breaking the Ice on Critical Thinking. Yeah. And it's going to be a 3-session format. And I think you'd like it. You have that kind of brain, but that's what we're working on. We have plans for other things. But right
Well,
now,
you know what, John?
yeah,
We're going to have to do another show once that material does come out, because what I'd like to do is do an episode on nothing but talking about that. And as we're wrapping up today right now, I'd like to know if you have any closing thought that you'd like to give to the audience. And by the way, John, I really do want to get with you later and talk about this information. And when you get it completed, would you consider coming back on my show and we can have a discussion?
absolutely, Doc. You know, I appreciate you and I appreciate your story. You know,
you
you're
too.
a high value human being, and the time that you've given me today to just talk about things of interest, not only to us, but to your audience is it's what makes the world a better place, man. And it sounds so cliche and all that.
No, it's not.
But this is real life right here.
It's real life. And I'm dying to have you come back and we'll do an entire episode on it. Get that stuff completed for me, John.
Oh, we're working on it. I got a team, brother. We'll talk about it. But you know, but so what I tell people is, and this is what I see, polarization. Your sunglasses reminded me of it.
Yeah.
Polarization only works in sunglasses. It
Yeah,
doesn't work in sustainable communities. You can't be polarized. And think about this, and appreciate the audience being here. You know, you deserve a great life, and you can have a great life if you listen to shows like this, the Crisis Victory Show, because Doc and I, we're real human beings, and we really want to help. And I know in today's day and age, you know, what's the catch? There are real people out there that have been through some real shiza, and we really want to help you. And the host of this show proves it to me, and I have great hope for humanity. So that's
so do I.
Yeah.
So do I, brother. You know what? There's only two commandments that we were given in the New Testament. One was to love God above all things. And John, the other one is to love one another as he loved us. It's simple. Why do we complicate loving one another as he loved us? And I've lectured on this in countless churches as a guest pastor speaking. And, you know, it's so interesting to look at the faces in the audience confused because they don't know how to approach how John Krotec and Dr. Hal Bradley can literally love one another on the first encounter. And it's easy. It is easy.
And guys, let's leave it with a caveat, though, Doc, because the world is so misaligned.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the creepy kind of love.
Yeah.
It's
not
the kind
at
of
all.
love
Not at all.
that is so pure. It comes from the center of our very beings.
That's
we've got there's no motive here. And that's why we can get along and be honest with each other. Because I'm not trying to get something over on you, or you're not trying to get something over on me. We're grown men sharing our story so that we might help others. It's that simple. Your show's awesome, man. I didn't even know about you till yesterday.
I'm so glad that you came on. I was happy when Pete called me up and says, "Hey, I'm bringing John on the show, man." And I went, "Pete, great job." Well, listen, John, nothing but love and respect to you and to yours.
Likewise,
I love what you're doing to the world, to the humanity. You're really on a good track right now. And everything that you shared on the show, at least in my preference and understanding, I thoroughly got it. I got your message.
I didn't think you'd have a problem with it at all. Seriously. I didn't. I didn't.
Well, sending love to you and yours, and God bless you. And brother, thank you for coming on and doing this episode. We'll do another one in the future.
Look forward to it. And thanks to the audience for spending time with us today. We love y'all, and we really appreciate it.
Yes, we do. Thanks, John. Take care.
Yes, sir.
Okay, folks. Well, that wraps up another episode today. And I'd like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to catch our show. Now, if you like these shows, I would ask that you would please hit like, share, and subscribe. It's so important to us that we get these messages out, and we understand that these are graphic, almost toxic interviews. But, you know, this is the kind of impact that we feel is needed in order to make sure that people understand the significance of the problems that we are confronted within our own country and around the globe. So I'm going to say at this time that I love you all. God bless you all. Hasta luego, y vaya con Dios, and go.